Have you ever wondered why the Israel-Palestine conflict seems like an intractable quagmire? It's a story that stretches back over a century to a time when empires ruled the world and nationalism was in its infancy. Our tale begins in the late 19th century with the rise of two powerful ideologies: Zionism, the belief in a Jewish homeland, and Arab nationalism, the desire for Arab sovereignty in the Middle East. Both ideologies were born out of a desire for self-determination and a sense of national identity. But, as we'll see, their paths were destined to clash. A pivotal moment came in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, where Britain expressed support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This was followed by the British Mandate for Palestine, further fueling the already simmering tensions. And thus the stage was set for a century-long confrontation. Before the Six-Day War came a period of escalating tension, a rising storm that would eventually unleash in full force. We're now in the post-World War II era. The newly formed United Nations had approved the partition plan for Palestine in 1947, intending to divide the land into Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international control. This plan, however, was rejected by the Arab states and Palestinian leaders. They saw it as a violation of their rights to self-determination. As a result, in 1948, the Arab-Israeli War broke out. This war, also known as the War of Independence or Nakba, depending on which side you're viewing it from, resulted in an Israeli victory and a significant displacement of Palestinian people. The aftermath of this war led to a tense peace, but one that was continually punctuated by outbreaks of violence. Skirmishes at the borders, retaliatory attacks, all foretelling the storm that was about to break. In the background, the great powers of the time, the US, the Soviet Union, were playing their own geopolitical games, supplying weapons and support to their respective allies. The scene is one of a powder keg, just waiting for a spark to set it off. In the midst of this, the Palestinian refugees, forced to live in camps in neighboring Arab countries, were growing increasingly frustrated. Their plight was a constant reminder of the unresolved issues of the conflict, adding fuel to the simmering tensions. The stage was set, the actors in place, and the storm was about to break. The Middle East was on the brink of a conflict that would redefine its borders and its future. The scene ends with the sound of a distant explosion, a foreboding harbinger of the violence to come. This sets the stage for the pivotal events of 1967, the Six-Day War. Fast forward to 1967, a war is about to change the Middle East forever. In the heat of June, a conflict erupted that would be remembered as the Six-Day War. Israel, feeling threatened by military alliances and aggressive posturing from neighboring Arab states, launched a preemptive strike against Egypt. This swift action spiraled into a full-scale war with Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Remarkably, Israel emerged victorious after just 6 days, hence the name, the Six-Day War. Now, this isn't your typical war story. You see, the repercussions of this war were far-reaching and profound, stretching well beyond those 6 days. The victory allowed Israel to occupy significant territories: the West Bank from Jordan, the Golan Heights from Syria, and the Gaza Strip and Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Most importantly, Israel gained control over East Jerusalem, a city of immense religious and political significance. This occupation wasn't simply a matter of moving borders on a map, it involved real people and real homes. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians found themselves under Israeli control, and this new reality sparked a wave of resistance. Palestinians began to mobilize, forming movements and parties dedicated to restoring their lost territories. This led to the rise of notable Palestinian resistance movements such as Fatah and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. As the years rolled on, tensions continued to simmer. By the late 1980s, the pressure cooker of resentment and frustration exploded into the First Intifada, a Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation. This marked a significant shift in the nature of the conflict, moving it from the realm of international warfare to a deeply personal, grassroots struggle for freedom and rights. The map had changed, but the conflict had only deepened. The Six-Day War and its aftermath had irrevocably altered the landscape of the Middle East, planting the seeds for decades of unrest and struggle that continue to shape the region to this day. Hope springs eternal, and in the 1990s it seemed like peace was on the horizon. The decade brought with it the Oslo Accords, a series of peace agreements between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization. These accords were a beacon of hope, signifying the possibility of an end to decades of conflict. The establishment of the Palestinian Authority was a significant milestone, a step towards self-governance for Palestinians. However, the path towards peace is rarely straight and smooth. The assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, the Israeli Prime Minister and one of the architects of the Oslo Accords, sent shockwaves around the world. This tragic event marked a turning point, causing a seismic shift in the peace process. With Rabin's passing, the fervor for peace began to wane and the process gradually collapsed under the weight of its own ambitions. The new millennium dawned with the Second Intifada, a period of intensified Israeli-Palestinian violence. This wave of conflict was more deadly and destructive, casting a long shadow over the hopes for peace. It was during this tumultuous time that Israel began the construction of the separation barrier, a move that further inflamed tensions. The barrier, stretching hundreds of miles and cutting through communities, became a potent symbol of division and discord. It was a physical manifestation of the deep-seated issues that the Oslo Accords had tried and failed to resolve. The construction of the barrier further isolated Palestinians, exacerbating feelings of resentment and animosity. The peace process, once a beacon of hope, had turned into a series of missed opportunities and broken promises. The dream of peace seemed more elusive than ever as both sides became entrenched in their positions. The seeds of compromise, once sown with so much hope, struggled to take root in the rocky soil of conflict. The road to peace, it seemed, was littered with obstacles. Yet despite the setbacks and failures, the quest for peace continues. The history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a testament to the complexity of human relationships and the enduring human capacity for hope. So, where are we now? In a word, stuck. The pendulum of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is currently at a standstill, caught in the grip of a seemingly never-ending cycle of events. On one hand, we have the relentless Israeli settlement construction. Picture an ever-encroaching concrete jungle, its tendrils slowly but surely eating into lands that were once Palestinian. On the other hand, we have the blockade of Gaza, a veritable stranglehold that has been in effect for well over a decade. The blockade, imposed by Israel and Egypt, has resulted in a dire humanitarian situation, turning Gaza into what some might call the world's largest open-air prison. But let's not forget the internal Palestinian political divisions. The split between Fatah and Hamas is as wide as ever, with no signs of a bridge to connect the two. These divisions have only served to compound the issue, making a unified front against the Israeli occupation a far-fetched dream. Now let's turn our gaze to the people whose lives are directly affected by these events. For them, this conflict is not a historical event to be studied, nor a political issue to be debated. It's their reality, as constant as the rising sun. In Israel, the conflict has bred an atmosphere of fear and insecurity, with the ever-present threat of rocket attacks. It's like living on a bed of nails, never knowing when the next strike might come. In Palestine, the impact is even more profound. The conflict dictates every facet of daily life, from access to basic necessities like water and electricity, to the freedom of movement, or rather, the lack thereof. And yet, amidst all this, there is a resilience, a spirit that refuses to be broken. Both sides continue to live, to hope, to dream of a day when the sunrise will bring peace instead of conflict. And so the conflict persists, with no end in sight. In the end, what can we make of this tangled web of history and conflict? This tale of Israel and Palestine is an enduring narrative steeped in a complex and intricate history that dates back centuries. It begins with the genesis of conflict, the birth of Israel, the dramatic Six-Day War and its aftermath, the peace processes and their failures, and the current stalemate we find ourselves in. Each chapter of this story reveals the deep historical roots of the conflict and the immense challenges that stand in the way of a peaceful resolution. It's a saga marked by moments of hope and despair, victories and losses, peace and violence, all intertwined in an intricate dance of power and identity. Yet, despite the seemingly insurmountable challenges, the quest for peace persists. And while history has a way of repeating itself, the hope remains that perhaps one day this cycle can be broken. Until that day comes, the story of Israel and Palestine continues to unfold.